If you're learning Italian, then you need to be reading. Most people never bother, so don't be like that. I'm going to recommend 7 Italian books here that I think you'll love as an early stage reader. And I'm not holding back here either. Topics will include Mussolini, teenage pregnancy, and much more, but they're all chosen specifically to help improve your Italian. So let's get into it. Beginning with number 1, An Introduction to Italian Poetry, a dual language book. Now, if you're the kind of person who goes running for the hills at the mere mention of poetry, then now is exactly the time to be paying attention. Here is a book of 34 Italian poems, and they're even they're short ones too. So even as a beginner, you can really get stuck in, and you'll be able to tell people, I read Italian poetry, and not be lying. I was quite amazed to find that there's even one here with Michelangelo, since the poems were pulled from 7 centuries. Here you can also see that there are English translations on the facing pages, although I'm hoping that you try and cover those up, at least for the first read. But I think you'll love this book, probably most when you're at a slightly higher, maybe an intermediate level, but even if you're still a beginner, you'll do just fine, because poetry isn't always about understanding the literal meaning anyway, so don't worry about it making perfect sense. Just do what I did and whip yourself up a cup of Earl Grey and enjoy the rhythm and beauty of the words. You'll still pick up plenty of new vocabulary. And if you're new here, welcome to the channel. My name is Ollie Richards, and this here, well, it's all about helping you learn a new language quickly using the power of story so that you can become fluent faster and live your best life. But now, if you're not really into poetry, then maybe the next 3,000 books I'll show you here will excite you. I'm only joking. There's 6 more. I've just grabbed one from my cool collection, which is Topolino. Now, one of the most fun ways you can start reading Italian is to get into Italian comic books. And what better than the very same comics that all the Italian kids read? I mean, this one here, well, Arthur Conan Doyle, anybody? Anyway, if you're curious, well, this globe-trotting little mouse is one that you've definitely heard of. It's none other than Mickey, of course, but this is not Hollywood Mickey Mouse. This is the Italian Topolino and his friends Paperino, Minnie, Pippo, and so on. There are a bunch of different collections and adaptations of famous classics here, from Dante's Inferno to fun kind of 007 parodies. And this cool issue I have here, Mickey, or Topolino, is Sherlock Holmes's sidekick. So move over, Watson. The language is very close to the way native speakers talk, actually. So you'll find tons of colloquial expressions and sayings in these funny adventures. And with over 3,000 issues, you won't run out. But when you're in the mood for some more serious reading, here's a book that you might like. It is called Short Stories in Italian, New Penguin Parallel Text. Now, this one is a great introduction to 20th century Italian literature. You can read 8 thought-provoking tales dealing with themes like the Holocaust, teenage pregnancy, the boredom of married life. It's quite a mix here, but some of the stories, really are quite captivating. I'd say that these stories are great. They're great for intermediate level learners, and you'll get some cool insight into Italian culture as well. It is written in parallel text, so if you really get stuck, you can look at the English page, although I hope you don't, because you'll learn faster if you're not trying to translate. I've got to be honest, I'm not a fan of parallel text. I think instead of reading something difficult with the English translation, it's far better to read at your own level, so-called comprehensible input, because then you can actually push yourself a little bit more at something that is at a level that's possible to understand. And that's why I recommend this next book, Short Stories in Italian by a certain Ollie Richards. Now, if you're new here, you might not know that I wrote some stories to help language learners. And the background to this is that I learned Italian myself a few years ago, and in one epic 90-day project it was, and I recorded the whole thing on YouTube, which you can find up here. And I think you'll find it really informative. One of the things I showed in this project was that I learned for the first month, the first 30 days, purely by reading stories. And so this book, which I produced with Teach Yourself, is one of the ways that you can actually model what I did, should you wish, with something that I've actually written. I've always thought that we needed something like this, stories that are fun, readable, but still challenging. I even tried to design the book to make it nice to read. So these are 8 exciting stories covering a range of genres, from science fiction, crime, history, thriller, fantasy. And I also worked in the most 1,000 common Italian words as well. So I hope it's both entertaining and useful. So my goal is to make you really fall in love with reading in Italian, after all, because if you can do that, then, well, you are absolutely set. So I had the beginner version, I had also the intermediate version, and some very fetching colours. But you might alternatively prefer this book over here, which is 101 Conversations in Simple Italian. Now, the thing is that when you are learning Italian, you need to be hearing a lot of real life conversations. obviously, right? That's the engine for learning to understand native speakers. You can hear them in Italian movies, and I have some recommendations as well. But what about reading actual dialogues? Well, this book here is 100% in Italian, and it's all conversations that tell a story between 6 Italian characters who get caught up in a mystery. So it starts off with 2 friends who go to Rome for a nice, exciting holiday, but then they soon discover that some very valuable paintings in one of Rome's antique markets, and then things start to get interesting there, but you'll have to read the book itself to find out what happens. So some of my students have had a lot of fun with this. You can get a friend and pick a character, read out the lines. A lot of book groups use this, actually. I'm sure you'll have a laugh doing so. But this is a great way to get used to speaking Italian. Now, this next one might surprise you in its simplicity, but I chose it especially for you cat lovers out there. Ottavia, I Gatti di Roma. Now, this is meant for children, and it has beautiful illustrations, but don't raise your brow at the childlike book, because this one is good enough for grown-up kids as well. It's an entertaining adventure story about 2 cats, Ottavia and Julius, who wander through the ancient ruins in modern-day Rome. And it's a good way to learn some simple Italian language about the eternal city, the history, the geography, the archaeology, and so on. Now, because of the educational element, this book, which also has parallel text, again, not my preferred way of learning, but I think beginners will find the vocab quite useful. And also, if you do happen to have kids, this could be a great way to get them interested in learning Italian. And then at the end of the book as well, you'll find actually a location map of the sites in Rome, which kind of really doubles as a really nice walking route through central Rome. A very cool idea, I thought. I might have to steal that one day. And another cool idea is actually to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It is a cool idea. And you should also turn on notifications too, because I'm going to be giving away all of these books in the next week or so. So look out for that. Now we're going to move on to something a little deeper now, which is Cristo si è fermato a Eboli. Now this magnificent book is a full-length Italian novel and an excellent one to tackle if you're up for a bit of a challenge. The language is actually quite simple and clear, but it's peppered with words from a local dialect, and I thought that might be interesting for you. In context, you'll get a sense of what these words mean, so try not to let it faze you. This story is set in a fictional village in southern Italy during the fascist regime of Mussolini, and it's about the author's own life experiences in exile. It really gets into the daily struggles of poor people in the Italian countryside. And these are people who are, quite primitive and full of strange superstitions, and I found it really compelling. The cultural insights you get here can really blow your mind. What's cool is that you'll be reading something rated as one of the greatest novels in Italian literary history as well. So I'd say go for it if you're at maybe an intermediate level and you've already read a few simpler storybooks first, because it really is worth the effort. So now, move over, Grimm brothers. Here are 200 popular Italian fairy tales. Fiabe Italiane by Calvino. Now, this is what fairy tales are all about. These folk tales are deeply rooted in Italian culture, and as fairy tales go, the stories are all about courage in the face of hardship, the presence of forces and powers, good overcoming evil, love and happy endings. What a great way to read Italian, right? I think there are 200 tales in this book, and they have epic titles like Naso d'Argento and L'uomo che usciva solo di notte. Even if you're not a fairy tale fan, I have a feeling this book will get you hooked on reading Italian. Lots of weirdness, lots of charm, and a very good choice for lower and intermediate levels too. Now, when you read these books, if you want to maximize the huge benefits you'll gain from reading, then I recommend you check out this video where I show you the right way to learn vocabulary from your reading. There's a very specific method I recommend to learn and memorize words from stories, and you know what, your comprehension will go through the roof. So click the video over here right now and discover how that works.